Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to this podcast, you might not know if Matthew Broderick's a good actor or not. Welcome to Half-Ass Movie Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Half-Ass Movie Podcast, a show where we put together a half-ass theme as an excuse to watch movies. My name is Adam Portress, and joining me today, the sportos, the motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, weirdos, and dweebs, and dickheads. They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude. Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
I bet you never smelled a real school bus before.
And you saw him pass out last night at the 31 Flavors. Bruce Leslie.
I only made it to flavor 27. I'm a failure.
But here's the thing. You're going to keep going back and you're going to keep trying again. And you know what? That's what's important, is that you keep getting back up on that ice cream horse and you keep whipping him until you've hit all 31 of those flavors, buddy. We believe in you.
Thank you.
And we believe in all of you because welcome back, everybody. We got another month here and another theme has arisen. Headliner, Matthew Broderick. This all came about, actually, our boy Bruce here. Bruce had a good idea. He said Matthew Broderick movies where he was the headliner of said movies, but one of his co-stars would go on to do so well in Hollywood that that movie would be the last time Matthew Broderick's name would be above his now more famous co-star. And so we're going to start that out with, I think most would say, is the quintessential Matthew Broderick movie, if at least not the first one that pops into most people's minds when thinking about him. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Sean, this was your pick.
Yes, it was. There was a time where this was my favorite movie. Due to circumstances around some of the actors involved with this movie, it is no longer my favorite movie anymore. I do watch it with a tinge of like, oh, guys, why do you have to be so horrible in real life?
We're talking about you, Edie McClurg.
McClurg. And boy, do I have a lot to say about her today. But the overwhelming feeling, because I watched this again last night for the first time in a while. I believe that I said on the show last week that I was able to speak along with the movie. That's not the case anymore. I've lived enough life now where I can't go line by line with the actors, but
that's a good thing. Means you've freed up a couple of megabytes there in the old brain where you're just like, let's flush that one out and clear the cache on that one, will we?
For things that matter. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice. I really I still think that this thing it's almost it's almost like this movie has been saved from itself a few times while they were making it, even because when you watch this movie now, and if you've watched this movie with as many movies as we've seen, so you know how movies get made and you know how movies are basically released, and just like the nitty gritty of like, okay, so you need to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this, and you realize that this movie has none of those things. It's sort of amazing that it holds your attention for the entire movie, because it's not a high-speed, fast-paced movie either. But it holds your attention the entire time, and I think that has something to do with both your casting of your actors in this movie and just the magic of this doesn't feel like a real place ever, and it's that's kind of its secret weapon, right?
Yeah,
is the fact that this isn't real life, and it wasn't even real life at the time. It's almost like how I always describe Wayne's World and Mike Myers movies in particular, is that this isn't supposed to be real life. This is supposed to be like an amplified version of what real life looks like, and I think that this movie nails it.
I think you could definitely put that label into a lot of Hughes' work. It's just kind of life very amplified.
John Hughes shows you what you wish life was like. Even the bad parts. You wish that the bad part was this kind of bad, that was easily identifiable. You know what I mean?
And we could get through it with a quick little speech and a feel good about yourselves, and then we've all learned a little something and hug.
Well, there's a thing. What Hughes always said that his secret weapon was when it came to his movies that he wrote and directed is that a lot of people forget, and writers specifically forget, that when you are a kid, it's great to feel good, but it also can feel good to feel bad. And that's what a lot of his
Yes.
movies touch upon. And that's kind of his secret sauce to his scripts.
And I think he really managed to tap into plenty of people told stories for people who had reasons to feel bad. You know what I mean? Like there are The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. You know, there are movies like even Stephen King's works, you know, where the kids are being bullied and from the wrong side of the tracks, it sucks to be poor. But what John Hughes went into, and I think he may have even created this term, but suburban angst. Like he tapped in to even, I mean, this would so become Gen X's identity when you look forward to movies like Reality Bites and Singles. But we were a generation of people raised in the most peaceful and prosperous time in American history, and we were pissed off about it. And
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I mean, look at, you know, I'm a kid in a trailer park in Central Appalachia watching Ferris Bueller and feeling bad for the kid when he's living in this damn mansion with a radio set up and a computer. Like he's saying, I wanted a car and I got a computer. Well, I was a pretty smart kid. I could have done a lot with a computer, and all I got was a calculator. So, you know, that's just life. You watch this, but he still managed to tap into it, because I could relate to Ferris, where I could feel bad for him and want him to skip school, but still, when I'm living through his life, it's so much better than my own. But we're not quite at the point of the podcast where we're going to talk about perspectives on
Ferris is drawing boobs on MS Paint, and Bruce is over here writing boobs on a calculator and turning it upside down.
I'm still writing Boss Hog. That's where I'm at.
But
anyway, we will get into perspective and see like how much of this movie really is about Ferris, even though his name's on the front.
Yeah, and then I got some thoughts on this movie too, because I saw this movie actually very, very late in life and everything, and I'll talk about why and all that kind of good stuff. Before we do all that, we do want to say thank you to the people that support this show and voted for this headliner Matthew Broderick series over at patreon.com/HMP. As I said, those guys get pre-show, post-show, Dinger Zone, and get to vote on the theme. And this month they chose headliner Matthew Broderick by a good chunk of margin there and everything. So that's how we're getting in there. So be like those fine folks. Join us over there. $1 all the way up, however much you feel like spending. What if this show just disappeared? What would you pay on a Monday to get it back for a month? For a month, even if that's $1, put that down. You're not going to miss $1 coming out of your account every week. Just go over to patreon.com/HMP, support the show, get yourself more content. It's a win-win for everybody. And if you can't do that, at least drop on down to the iTunes, give us a 5-star review, or shoot us an email at halfasspod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd appreciate it. Let's get into it, boys. Here's the IMDb plot line for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. As we know, IMDb 100% correct in everything they say and or do. A popular high school student admired by his peers decides to I can't freaking talk today. Let's start again. A popular high school student admired by his peers decides to take a day off from school and goes to extreme lengths to pull it off and to change to the chagrin, that's the word I was falling over, to the chagrin of his dean, who'll do anything to stop him. Would he be dean? I feel like he's the principal.
Principal.
Yeah, I feel like that's just somebody who doesn't live in America and thinks like, that's the dean. It's always the dean in these things. No, it's not how it works. This written and directed by John Hughes. So he, of course, of Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Uncle Buck, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Weird Science, She's Having a Baby, and his opus, Curly Sue, starring Matthew Broderick, Alan Ruck, Mia Sara, Jeffrey Jones, Jennifer Graves, Edie McClug, Ben Stein, and of course Charlie Sheen, who is ultimately, I would say, the linchpin.
He's the one who would be to the top billed today. Yes.
Yeah, we need to make that the convention too on this month's group of shows, is like pointing out specifically who it is that we think qualifies from this cast to get billing ahead of Matthew Broderick in the movie that we will be making in 2025.
Yeah, this was almost one that I had for half a second I had forgotten that Charlie Sheen was in this, and I'm like, listen, I'm a fan of these other folks, but I don't think they're going to get billed before Matthew Broderick gets it. Charlie Sheen, yes, Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, I'm
Charlie
pretty
Sheen.
sure he's uncredited in this too.
He is. He's credited.
Oh, okay. I thought he was uncredited. I wasn't certain.
No, he's credited.
Is he credited as Estevez or is it Sheen yet?
Sheen.
Nice.
This is after Red Dawn, because Jennifer Grey recommended him for the part. And
his
Hughes was like, of
has
course.
His character actually has a name, I just discovered.
Yes, he does. And
Garth?
and got cut. Like, he had a whole backstory. This movie, the working print of this movie when it first came in was 2.5 hours long. So this character, the Garth Volbeck, he is a character that when his, like, you meet his family, you meet all of the problems that he has. His family is the Volbecks own the tow company. So when you see Ed Rooney, his car get towed away, it says Volbeck on the side of the towing of the tow truck. And so there's all of these things that are in this movie that I always wondered about, and I've gotten answers to all of these things, because there's a bunch of questions I had, like small questions, like, why are there children's drawings on the refrigerator at the Bueller house? Like, because the refrigerator, you see it all the time when they're in the kitchen. And the reason being is that there were 2 other Bueller kids that were in the working print of this movie that they completely cut them out. So all you know is that Jeannie and Ferris are the only 2 kids in the Bueller house, when actually there were supposed to be 4.
These teenagers have cartoon finger paintings on the fridge. Like, what?
They do. There is.
My youngest teen is scheduled to turn 14 in about a month. And I still have children's drawings on my fridge because I can't bring myself to throw some of them away.
Put them in a box. That's what I did.
Yeah, I like them up on the fridge, and I tell people I drew them because they're really good. Anyway,
have they been there for a decade, though? You don't have these 4-year-old drawings up there, do you?
Maybe.
Bruce, we just don't clean too much.
It was the last time he wrote a picture and said, "I love my dad," so it stays up.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
All right, so back to Ferris Bueller and all the stuff that's cut out. You know, I can see how this would come in at really, really long, because one of the things I kind of like and admire about this is that this really is one of those woven stories that's given us like a Rooney story. It's given us a Jeannie story. Of course, we're getting our main story, which of course is a Cameron story disguised as a Ferris Bueller story. And then you've even got the guys running around in the car that occasionally you see, the 2 parking attendants.
Right.
Who's, let's see, what are their names? Sam and Victor. And the only reason I know their names is because Paramount Plus is reportedly working on a spinoff film called Sam and Victor's Day Off, which is all about what those 2 guys did in the Ferrari that day.
Man, the amount of high grade going around Paramount must be amazing.
Wow.
Because that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life.
Extremely low grade. I mean, there's 2 ways to look at it, Adam.
They looked at the Sony emails and said, "Hold my beer."
That's amazing. That's right up there, like with the Get Smart movie. At least they had the wherewithal to make the sequel to Get Smart like 6 months after the original movie came out. It's not 40 years later. It's so stupid.
We got to strike why the iron has rusted over.
I not only like the idea, I want to get the original actors and just act like that's no big deal. Like, just totally not.
That's what you find out, is that they're actually like the producers of it, and it's been them that's been trying to get this off the ground for 35 years.
That'd be great. Oh, if they went totally meta with it, that would be kind of fun.
But like, we've been pitching this to Universal forever and a day, but they're like, Universal didn't put out this film. Shut up.
Oh man, I want to see the Sam and Victor's Day Off. Did you guys ever watch the TV show, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off TV show starring Charlie Schlatter?
I watched maybe 5 minutes of it, and I was already done.
I think I saw a commercial one time, but I was, a child.
Can we agree it was inferior to Parker Lewis Can't Lose, which was the ripoff TV show based on
this?
This?
Not even close, man. At least Parker Lewis had like its own identity. They were trying to, they were basically coasting on drafting off of the Ferris Bueller train, but at least it was doing its own thing. Whereas the Ferris Bueller show, they couldn't figure out oh, the only reason why this works in the first place is because this movie is actually saying something, whereas the TV show is saying literally nothing.
Yeah, well,
So-
and the big difference is Parker Lewis Can't Lose got onto a Naughty by Nature album. Where did Ferris Bueller's Day Off go? Nowhere.
Well, I kind of, I obviously liked Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I was at the age. I mean, you're the same age as me, Sean. This was this junior high age where I liked it, but a lot of it was I was liking it because the older high school kids were telling me it was good. So it took me a while to like it on my own. But I thought, well, if I like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I'll probably like this other similarly titled movie. And I got A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon, starring River Phoenix and Meredith Salinger. You guys familiar with that at all?
Yeah, I've seen that movie.
It's very different.
Yes.
If you're looking for a Ferris Bueller vibe, you're not going to get it from A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon. So I got burned. I found out that you can't always trust titles of movies. But when you watch this movie, guys, I'll start with you, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch this movie from the get-go, I know later on in life things will change and stuff, but from the get-go, did you watch this movie relating to Ferris or relating to Cameron?
So I saw this a lot later in life. I want to say I probably watched it first, maybe in my 20s. I think. I will say this, I am kind of glad that I didn't see this young because this probably would have been a very bad influence on me because I was very influenceable. But at that point also, I had kind of had my Ferris Bueller, if you will, in the form of Zach Morris. That was my Ferris Bueller because he was essentially the same character.
Very much one-to-one influence, just an inferior product because of various reasons. But yeah, I mean,
exactly.
You
but
can't compare a Saturday afternoon TV show to a John Hughes movie.
Precisely. But as a child, like that was my kind of version of this. So when I saw this other stuff, it didn't much appeal to me because I already kind of had my version of that thing, you know?
So when, you know how it's kind of wonky with the Zach Morris stuff where he turns to the camera and it seems a lot less wonky with Ferris Bueller. I just learned this recently is the reason why it's so seamless with Ferris is because 99% of the time, 99% of the time when Ferris turns to the camera and speaks to the audience, when he's done speaking to the audience, it's a cut. There's very few times where that doesn't happen.
There's no like pause the scene because Zach Morris would pause the scene, talk to the camera, then go back to the scene.
And it's really wonky and it's it feels wrong.
Well, yeah, they had to differentiate.
And I'm going to say that you guys might think I'm wrong. The listeners might think I'm wrong, but if you do think I'm wrong, keep it to yourself because I'm not listening. I believe that our generation, like our generations, even the elder millennials and the Gen X folks, I think we're so open to fourth wall breaking entertainment because we were weaned on this. I really
agree.
think that the fourth wall breaking here, I think that it might be tough for people who didn't live through this kind of era to have an idea of just how culturally impactful this movie was.
Well, I mean, it's Deadpool now. Like Deadpool can run because Ferris Bueller crawled. I think that the other part to this too is that when you watch like a documentary on this movie, is just how much difficulty Matthew Broderick was having with that element to this movie. Is that he kept having a problem? Like he's like, I don't know how to make this work, and so he and Hughes would go back and forth constantly about, you know, how are we going to make this look seamless and good? And when you are watching like an interview with 2020 Matthew Broderick, he's like, and he was right. But when you are watching him on set, there's arguments because Matthew Broderick's like, I can't see the thing
at the time. Yeah.
Well, yes, but he's like, I can't see the thing that you're trying to show. Like you see him say that to Hughes. And so, you know, and yes, he was a kid at the time. He was 23 when he shot Ferris Bueller, but it's like, it's one of those things where like, it shows you that Hughes is like, even though he's known for being able to get performances out of children in movies and television, he is not a great communicator. He can't show you what he wants like in his head.
I think that probably leads to some of the beautiful nuance in his films too, when the actors have to give their own interpretation a little bit. Who did you relate to, Sean? I'm really picturing you as a guy who watched this, and Ferris is the character you're relating to and latching on to, and the one you might want to emulate.
No, it's funny because I can see where you would say that, and why you would say that is because when I was in high school, when I first saw this in junior high specifically, this is the first VHS I ever saw.
Yes, I saw it in VHS. Junior high. I saw it in junior high too, which I'll add the comment that I hope you agree with. When you're in junior high, what you think is going to be the coolest thing ever is yourself when you're in high school. So this is to us was maybe like a primer on how to behave.
No, I get that.
Saw when I saw this, I immediately related to Cameron. I was Cameron all the way. I wanted to be Ferris, but I was way more Cameron.
That's what I was going to say. I think for the majority of us, it's like we would, if indeed we would want to be anybody, we would want to be Ferris, but deep down we all need to rather admit that we're more Cameron than we are Ferris.
Well, you know, I'm just going to say I don't think there's any doubt from you guys that when I'm watching this, even though, you know, I come from humble beginnings, it's not the money part of things, but there's a whole lot of reason for me to identify with Cameron here. I mean, even though he claims to have parents, we never see his parents. At least we see Ferris's parents. I mean, he is the quintessential latchkey kid. His last name catches my attention from the first time I watched this movie when they're calling roll in the morning. And we see him in a t-shirt with a medical caduceus on it, which, you know, in junior high, I'd already made up my mind that was my future. And it feels like his mind's been made up for him. Alan Ruck, from what I read, and you can correct me if you have any information to the contrary, but 29 years old in this role.
Yeah, he's older.
Looking quite young for 29. That explains how he's able to bring so much nuance to this, because I feel like he really, really channeled a more realistic view, or maybe a more constricted view, or maybe it's even just a prequel to the character. I think his name was Ben from The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman's character. But I'm sitting here looking at Cameron, and I'm like, that has to be so influenced by that. And at 29 years old, he would have been plenty old enough to have been quite familiar with The Graduate, you know, when he's making this in 86, 85.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm not blowing people away with this information, because basically this is common knowledge at this point, but he gets the role because of Matthew Broderick, because they had been working together on Neil Simon on a Neil Simon play when Broderick gets the job.
Yeah.
And so they're looking around for Cameron, and Broderick's like, you need to see this guy because I'm working with him on stage. He's great. We already have a chemistry, so that will work too. And they did. They knew each other.
And Cameron had auditioned for Bender.
Right.
So he had, you know, I don't know that he had actually met John Hughes when he auditioned for Bender, but he had been around the production company.
Right. And so, you know, you don't have to, and whenever you see an interview with Broderick or with Ruck, they constantly talk about how we didn't have to manufacture anything because we were already friends before the movie even started. And you can really kind of feel that coming off screen when especially when all three are together, like you can really feel that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the part of there's so many things about this movie that are, I want to get into my big theory about this movie if I can.
Well, let's get into your big theory, because it might be my big theory.
So there are 4 scenes in this movie that you are never going to beat. If you're really, really lucky, you get one of those. Like, I think that the hands down best action adventure third act you've ever seen in your life is Back to the Future. The third act of that movie, the climax of that movie, is the most rewarding third act you've ever seen in a movie.
Drum tight.
Let me know when I'm open to comment.
However, the 4 things that this movie does that no one is ever going to beat. One is the call to Rooney's office. That is unbeatable. If you were trying to do a scene like that, you are either copying this or you have to go the exact opposite way with it, because you are never going to beat everything that happens in that scene. Whether it's the Rooney starting to make the jokes, all the stuff that's happening with Grace and Rooney in the office, then there's the realization of that it's not Ferris on the phone. the camera pans in, like everything about that scene, you are never ever going to beat that scene.
Did they cheapen it by doing the same thing with Abe Froman, essentially?
But I mean, we'll get to that.
I think yes
Right,
and no, because
I apologize.
Well, I'll just quickly touch. I like it because it's a riff on the same thing, but again, it shows the resourcefulness of him, that he is like, that's what I love about the character, is he's thinking on his feet super fast.
Yes.
He's like the Joker. He's always got a backup plan ready to go. And so he's like, he thinks well enough to call the own place. That's where I think you're doing it again, but you're also building a little bit more character within that. It feels like to me,
the multiple lines and the call waiting and all that was kind of a novel idea then too.
Exactly.
Like,
I think it's so, and it's
it'd
of
be
the
like
time.
looking back in 40 years and saying, did he really need to text people twice in the movie? So, it's just kind of cool. I get it. I was just asking the question. That's all. And while we got a little bit of a break, I'm going to say that I think the third act of this movie could give Back to the Future a run for.
Well, we're going to get there.
That's just a personal preference.
We're going to get there. So the second scene that you're never going to beat is the scene in the museum, because it starts off as something that's cute and fun, but there is such emotional. It has such an emotional ending, and it gives the movie heft to make you know that, oh, you're watching a movie that's actually trying to say something here. When you're looking at that Seurat painting and Cameron is and it keeps going in and in closer and closer to tell you that Cameron is the reason why he's relating to this painting is because he doesn't actually know who he is. And like to see, like when the closer you look, the less you see, like that kind of thing. It is incredible. And the fact that you have anytime you're going to have Edward Hopper in your movie, I'm all on board. And so you get the Nighthawks painting, like the clearances on this movie. I can't even imagine. They had to have had 4 months of just trying to clear everything in that entire scene.
The Art Institute of Chicago, a favorite museum of my family's. We go to Chicago every couple of years. It's a must go to. It is a genuinely religious experience. I want to credit, I'm struggling with the cinematographer's name, Fujimoto. The DP, I think, was Fujimoto, is his name, Tak Fujimoto.
Famous.
I want to credit that guy with creating his own art, because rather than having moving pictures, we set up these very static shots where the person in the museum looking at the painting looks like the work of art itself. And then you've got that Sunday in the Park or whatever, that Seurat pointillism piece.
Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jaffe.
Yeah. So, once again, a personal favorite of the family here. We love that picture, but you point that out, and that is people looking at other things that you would think would be the centerpiece of your artwork, but rather it's the people that are the centerpiece. So it's sort of echoing in that big piece what Fujimoto's doing with his static shots here leading up to it, where the art is an excuse to create the real art. And I just kind of like that level. And as a person who's gone from growing up in a trailer park to actually being in the Louvre, it's strange that sometimes with the effect that look at art eye to eye so close like that can have on a person. And just to see John Hughes's appreciation for it and the way it gets translated into this, it means a lot to me. I really like it.
Can I tell you, the first time I saw it, I hated that scene.
Really?
I love that scene. It always made me feel like I should be a cool, like it made me as a junior high nerd feel like it was okay to be cool by liking art or something. It really spoke to me.
It's my first intention was like, when I just like, these kids wouldn't do this. They wouldn't be here for this. I didn't believe that. And again,
I was this kid. I would have done that.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Cameron would be this kid.
Cameron would be. I could understand Cameron would be, but not.
So let's use this as an opportunity to talk about our friend here, our titular character, Ferris Bueller.
Well, let's not, because I want to finish my point.
Oh, I thought you just did. I apologize.
No, we've only gone through two things, because you're never going to beat, right? You're never going to beat the phone call to the high school. You're never going to beat that. You're never going to beat the museum set piece. You're also never going to beat the parade.
Yeah, the parade's great.
As somebody who worshipped anything that came out from Saturday Night Live at the time, And Saturday Night Live with the Blues Brothers with their street scene, I was like, well, you're never going to beat that. And then Ferris Bueller comes out. You will never ever beat this parade scene ever.
And without checking, do either of you guys know the name of this parade?
General von Steuben Parade.
The von Steuben Day Parade, which I remember because I have a very dear friend from a town called Steubenville that's also named after him. So
also, they when they were making the movie, they were like, is there any day parades in Chicago? And they were like, yes, there's one. And actually, when they were shooting, like, there's a really big one called the von Steuben Parade. And they were like, perfect. So they shoot the parade, but they didn't get everything they wanted. So they made another parade. they shoot in the real parade. They shoot then they shoot a fake parade, and they're like, we need to have enough people. We want to make it look like it's as big as the von Steuben Parade. And they were like, we were hoping for X amount. I can't remember what the amount is. And actually what ended up happening was there were over like 10,000 people who showed up for the parade. And so it was a much bigger deal than we thought.
So when somebody goes, hey, John Hughes,
I'm going to say that it did have a couple of things I want to say. Number one, it had the best segregated dance scene of the 80s. Racially segregated.
It almost felt like they went back and were just like, shit, there's no black people in this movie. Quick.
I love it that even though they had black dancers, it's obvious it was a white choreographer. And I'll leave it at that. Another thing I started thinking about, even when I was young, I thought, like, what cruel bastard has a parade on a day you got to go to school? Like, is this just a parade for unemployed adults? Because, like, the dad's still working, the kids are going to school. Who's at this parade? Like this. Just imagine, like, in Charlotte, Adam, and let's just say you punch the old clock at 4:30. You're going out of your car. You're getting ready to drive down to like Rock Hill or wherever you live. And next thing you know, parade going on. And you're just stuck in the office for an hour and a half till parade over and you can drive home. How are you feeling that day?
Pissed. Like, but yeah, you're right. Like, what are all of these unemployed people doing at this parade in the middle of the day? And they're packed deep when that Beatles song is going on. And by the time, and honestly, once you hit that, like, if the joy is not like, going throughout your body, you're just kind of broken maybe. Because just the energy of that entire scene and stuff, and not for nothing. And I've heard different stories, but if I'm Matthew Broderick at this point and I'm leading this parade and these 8 gajillion people around are just, all eyes on you, essentially. It's called Ferris Bueller's Day Off and you're playing Ferris. I couldn't imagine what that could do to somebody's psyche. Just to have all those people just...
Right. Also the other thing about that parade is that you probably can tell by watching the movie, but there's a lot of stolen shots in that scene. Like the guy that's the construction worker dancing, that was just a guy who was dancing, and they turned the camera up, and as a matter of fact, somebody says to the cinematographer, hey, there's a guy just dancing up there. Let's grab that. And so they do. They never figured out who the guy was. No one's ever come forward. They have no idea who it is.
I love stories like that.
He was on parole.
Me too, man.
And so discovered that guy was John Wayne Gacy.
But that guy could dance. But you look at the troupe of dancing, and you're like, well, this is clearly not choreographed by the same person.
When you see the end of the twist and shout part of the scene, and there's all the people in the middle of the street and stuff, Hughes was like, we got to get a shot from above because this is too much. Like we're gonna want it. And so they kind of figure out a way to because when you see it now, like when you're watching that scene, it is insane how many people are into it when everyone's dancing at the end.
Yeah.
Like it is.
Oh, it is nuts.
You could never get extra. I don't know how many times they shot that extra scene of the fake parade part, but it couldn't have been a lot because everybody is just totally in that scene. And there's probably, I'm not really good with numbers, but you can probably see somewhere around like 2,000 or 3,000 people in that scene. And every single person is into it. It's amazing. Just amazing.
They don't make them like that anymore, man.
No, they
Well,
just
when you
CGI
do-
all those people in there now because they're just like, we're not A, paying for all these people or B, wrangling them up or nothing like that. Hell, we'll CGI them and make them little Q-tips and put them in the background.
So you're never going to get a better parade in your movie. You're just not.
Agreed.
And the last one is where I was headed, which is the chase of Jeannie in the car, Ferris to the house, is just amazing. It's just amazing. And whenever you're going to have it like a foot trying to beat car chase, it never really looks correct, but this does, because of course he knows shortcuts because he's had to do this 100 times before.
And I've seen this trope played out in other more kid-centric movies where they're either on foot or on dirt bike, but I love it. I'm going to say, reserving the right to change my mind in the future if something I'm not thinking of right now comes up, but this is probably my favorite chase scene in cinema. At least favorite chase scene in a non-action movie, but I think you throw in the action movies, it's still my favorite. I love everything about this.
It's well timed, and it's been parodied and sent up.
And it's multifactorial. It's not just 1v1.
Yeah.
We've got two parents coming home separately. We've got Jeannie coming home. We've got Rooney's thing going on, and we don't know how different alliances are going to line up. And then on top of it all, just to, give me a little bit of a hoot about what a narcissist Ferris Bueller really is. He doubles back on his run to introduce himself to the ladies in the bikinis. Not 2 minutes after Mia Sarah has just said, he's going to marry me someday.
There's part of me, and I don't listen, this is me talking out my butt 110%, but there's part of me that felt like that was just part of the take. And then Broderick was like, hold on, wait a second. Let me hop back up here. And he didn't say, they dubbed in later Ferris, but he said, hi, Matthew Broderick. Nice to see you. That was my thought, was he's just like, oh, he didn't hear cut. And he was just like, oh, let me just roll on. Hey, how you doing, lady?
The other thing with this scene too, which is just amazing, is the dynamic of Jennifer Grey and the lady playing her mom in the car. They're so great together, those two.
She has that mean aunt haircut from the 80s too.
Yeah.
I say that because I had a mean aunt who had that haircut.
So good. And then you have all of the, him running through houses and hey, smells good, dinner's on. What? Who's that? All of those things happening at the same time. It's amazing. And it's the reason why this movie works so well, even though it has no 3-act structure. There is no 3-act structure in this movie.
Nope. Very much an anthology.
Your main character learns nothing and does not progress in any way. He is the exact same from the beginning to the end of your movie. You know so very little about anyone outside of just Cameron and Ferris. Even Sloane. You don't really know that much about Sloane.
She's a girl. That's it. She's a girl. She kind of likes Ferris. There you go.
The only thing you know about Sloane at the end of this movie is that Cameron's in love with her and Ferris is going to break her heart.
I love Mia Sarah so very much in this movie.
Remember Mia when we watched Time Cop?
Yes, I do.
I enjoyed Mia Sarah in Time Cop.
My word, Mia Sarah in this movie is just, she's probably the most beautiful woman in the world at this point.
In junior high, I was not prepared to handle the beauty of someone like Mia Sarah.
Right.
So I probably developed an unhealthy crush on her, which made me like Time Cop in a very creepy way I'm not proud of.
And in your refractory period, it's all about Jean-Claude.
It's also something that you don't see very often in Hollywood movies, which is there's a teenage girl, because she's the only actual teenager in this entire movie. There's a teenage girl who seems to be classier and smarter than everyone around her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's gorgeous and but she's also fun. She's not the bad guy. or she's not like Ferris. You're wrong. Like she's just like a fun person.
She's a
I've
go-along.
never seen that before this movie.
She is a little, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. I feel bad about how impactful that I know she was on a lot of guys our age, because she is underwritten and maybe taught us to like a girl who's more seen than heard and who's totally agreeable. Like,
who doesn't
I understand
like that?
I understand that these are not good things, but I mean, these are all kind of things that you could pick up if you based your dream for a girl on this performance. Is that fair to say, Sean?
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of problem too with the fact of like I've got to make grand gestures because Ferris made grand gestures towards women. Like that's a big thing.
And his is stupid and folly anyways too. He doesn't believe any of that crap.
And can we go ahead and slide into my two big points when I watch this and why I think this is John Hughes' most discussable movie? And I love it because it can bring up a lot of discussions about the whole concept of you have to totally remove authorial intent, because we're going to talk about things that John Hughes probably had no intention of being in here, but as time goes by, the story grows. But I mean, number one is, let's talk about what an evil person Ferris is.
Yes,
I mean, he is in the TikTok generation. You watch it, and it's Ferris Bueller, the narcissist, right?
You know what I noticed watching it this time is that the TV show Dexter takes a whole lot from Ferris Bueller, and
I can see that.
And so it's kind of the way that Dexter works, is that it's almost like the people who made that show were like, we need to make this like Ferris, because people still like Ferris anyway, even though he might be one of the worst people in the world.
Yes. But he is clearly a narcissist. When I watch this movie, like I say, I relate to Cameron because I feel like I had these charismatic, quote unquote, friends who I knew didn't give a crap about me, but they wanted to manipulate me to get me to do something for them. And I still did it because I was so lonely. You know, like I can see it and just pick up on all that pathology that is too well written to have been done intentionally, if that makes sense. Like,
it's true.
It would feel so heavy handed if John Hughes set out to write the story about what it's like to have a narcissist who you think is your best friend. It would have been awful if he tried to do that. But the fact that he did it accidentally makes it work so well.
Right. And you know, I don't know if you, because I didn't know this until I looked it up this week, but this is the character of Ferris is based on somebody that John Hughes went to school with. But it wasn't like one for one, he's Ferris, he's Cameron. It's more like they were tangentially friends. And the guy that he based Ferris on is a guy who was out of school like 18 times in the same semester. And that guy had a friend. So basically just tangentially related, like associated. Yeah. They weren't best friends or anything. They were just kind of friendly. But the guy that he based it on, Ferris and Cameron, were two guys who hung out with each other. And that is the kind of what the relationship was. And there's a guy who wrote an article for, I believe it's the Washington Post, that I am the real Ferris Bueller. And basically everyone's like, yeah, we know. We know you're the real
no
Ferris.
Big deal, man. Here, Bert Kreischer wants to have a word with you.
You guys can have your two-person convention together.
I apologize. Anyway, let's see. Oh, so another thing I want to build off on, and I kind of feel like we got to talk about the big one, but this is also like the thing that everybody talks about. But if you don't talk about it, everybody's going to say, I can't believe you didn't talk about it. Is Ferris Bueller even real? Or is this all the sort of interface with the world that Cameron is having during his psychotic break? Is Ferris Bueller some kind of devil on Cameron's shoulder that gets him to do things he can't do his own? Is he a fantasy that Cameron created? Is it like dissociative identity disorder maybe? But is he something that Cameron has created to deal with the fact that he can't accept his life and to force him into making it better? Because as we say, nothing happens to Ferris as far as a character arc. At the end of the movie, Cameron is ready to stand up to his dad and Ferris is happy for him. And Cameron, you feel like Cameron is going to have a new life from this point forward. His character's actually had an arc.
I don't think, I mean, I get why, like, that's fun to talk about. Like, I get why people are making that statement. That feels very, like message boards kind of
Oh,
thought.
that's exactly when I started running across it, was the old BBS stuff. But I think it's another one of those situations where you say, remember, we're pulling out authorial intent, because I don't think that there's any way Jonathan Hughes never wrote this kind of like fantasy story, you know, so there's no way he intended for Ferris Bueller to be a psychological entity. But just because he didn't intend that doesn't mean that that doesn't make the story work better. You know
I think
what I'm
those
saying?
people are just bored and they didn't like the film that they saw and they decided to make it one for themselves. Guess what?
It's also just fun, man. Like that's
It
a
is
fun
so
thing
much
to
fun.
think about.
You can watch a movie and take it at face value and enjoy it, and that's great. Or sometimes when you really get attached to something, like a lot of people get attached to this movie, you think, but what if, but I love this character, but do you really love, you know, that's the reason why people come up with essays about in The Karate Kid that Ralph Macchio's character Daniel is actually the villain. Nobody comes up with that for Breakin', that the bad break dancers were actually the heroes, because nobody cares about Breakin'. You love a movie, you want to dwell on it, and you want it to keep growing as you grow, and you want it to change, and you want it to be bigger than the 2 hours you got to see it.
The real villain is the rec center.
You got to paint that faster in every film.
The way that I kind of think of Ferris, especially watching it now, is that Ferris is basically a force of nature. He's not really a person.
Yes.
And so you have to look at it as this is basically Cameron's movie. And you know, Alan Ruck does get all of the moments in this movie too. Ferris doesn't have a lot of great moments. There's him being a goof and him being cute and him having like cool moments, but there's no big emotional.
There's no catharsis
hits.
at all. No.
Right. That's all Cameron. And that's kind of why it works so well, is that if you look at this movie, no one would want to see a movie where the sequel is Cameron in college, right? Like you would never want to see that movie.
Yeah.
As great as Alan Ruck is.
We all want to see that stupid car parking thing I told you about.
Do we?
Yeah.
No, of course we don't, but that's what we're going to get.
But
I will watch it. I mean, you say I have no shame. I have shame that I know I'm going to watch that. I won't tell you guys about it. I won't admit it, but I will watch it.
See, I think Ferris is kind of the guy, like I said previously, it's the kind of guy that, like, you know, everybody would kind of want to be like, you know, he, like, nothing seems to go wrong for him. It all falls in his lap. He's got the good looking girl. But Cameron, hold on, shut up.
I apologize.
Cameron is on the other side of that he is the more realistic side of that coin and stuff, where everyone kind of wants to be this guy, but you're more apt to be this actual guy. And ultimately, when you point at Ferris, he might have those things all going on, but like, is that guy ever going to be actually fulfilled with anything? I don't think so.
Well, I as I've told you guys before, my old writing partner used to say this about me all the time, is he's like, you know, you're living Ferris's life with Cameron's looks. He would say that all the time to me. And it's on purpose. Like I did that on purpose because I didn't want to be Cameron anymore. So I worked really, really hard to not be Cameron the whole time.
And now let me get into a little, and this will be the Gen X pushback portion of this. This goes into a common reoccurrence with John Hughes films, and one of the bigger problems that I have with them, and it is the Gen X woe is me, and I hate it to death. You know, to me, from sitting back, I look at Cameron and I just go, I understand Dad's not, you know, is the best communicator. And that seems to be a theme with John Hughes' stuff, is that Dad just doesn't talk real well. I get that and stuff, but like, your life's not that bad, buddy. It's really not. Your dad has a replica Ferrari in his thing. It's like, I understand that we need, you know, to do that. But a lot of it is, he just screams at Dad for being bad, but at the same time too, it never feels like this kid wants to connect with his father at all.
I hate to bring meta knowledge and to be a little too personal, but Adam, your dad, I think, nullifies your ability to see why people relate to some of this stuff.
I will agree with that statement.
You and your dad is unique. The fact that like wire to wire, it's been a good relationship. I think Sean and I can kind of get it maybe a little bit better where they're coming from, even though as adults we look back and we do see the woe is me is there. But I think part of what John Hughes was working with was like this misery theory that we all have misery that we have to get it out. And we can either get it out because we're living through the freaking Black Plague, or we can get it out during the most peaceful and prosperous time in U.S. history, but we're still going to get that misery out one way or the other. So it's just kind of showing like a healthier, happier way to be miserable in most of his movies. I mean, isn't that kind of a nice way to describe it, as a happy misery? That was the theme of his 80s teen angst movies.
But I don't disagree with you, Adam. I think that there is so much Gen X mad for no reason. Like there's so much of that. And it feels very, hey, get over yourself. If you're not in that time period, if you're an older person watching these movies for the first time, I could totally see people being like, look, things are way worse than how you have it. Like, of course.
Yeah, it's like you are not like the super poor kid and like, because John Hughes never made any of those movies. None of the John Hughes characters were ever like super poor ass kids, and even the poor,
he had no soda pop.
Even the poor kids weren't even all that poor in John Hughes films. You know what I'm saying?
It's true. I've never seen Curly Sue. Full disclosure, I've never seen Curly Sue. Maybe that just deals with just poverty. I have no idea.
Kevin was the poorest kid in his class in Home Alone, just for perspective. That's why I had that tiny little house of his.
Yeah.
That was the bad neighborhood that got knocked over, you know, in Chicago.
No gates in that neighborhood.
Oh my Lord. What a fantastic film that is. I love it so much.
But I think this is John Hughes' most discussable film, though, because it is the one where you can talk about all the, if you're in some kind of college class or something, or high school class that does this sort of thing, you can talk about the embodiment of all the different, maybe social anxieties, all the different psychological and personality issues that you can see with these two main characters. I don't know that you get to say as much about Sloane, unfortunately, but it's fun to discuss in those terms. And it gets you get to bring up things like authorial intent and talk about the idea of like, no matter how good you have it, there's a part of you that knows you could have it better. You know what I mean? Or thinks you can have it better. It's kind of like a joke you made once when you said Alan Silvestri's wife got mad because she heard that the truck that dropped money off in John Williams' wife's yard was bigger than hers, or something like that. like that joke stuck with me, Shanzi. So I see it as, there's some woe is me there, but it's got a lot that it's saying. And I just think it's the most discussable movie he's ever made. I can't think of any other one. You can kind of talk about the psychological implications, the sociological implications of the 80s. It's just great from top to bottom. There's so much.
The fact that adults just be falling for the dumbest shit ever. Like, really? You think that that's her father? What are you we're making out with him in the middle of the parking lot?
When Edie McClurg raises her head up and says, he's a real righteous dude, I remembered that, like, that's got to be how my kids feel when I call myself the Sigma Rizzler. Like, right? Isn't that our version of the Sigma Rizzler? The righteous?
Yes, of course.
Pretty much.
Of course. I that
Edie McClure, she's hot.
I gotta tell you something. I gotta tell you something about her with this movie in particular, which is amazing. Which is that they needed to do a lot of soft shoe and mime. The Ed Rooney and Grace character, and Jeffrey Jones has had zero background in improvisation, literally none. And so Edie McClure basically took the scene over, and she's like, okay, so here's what we're going to do is that there's this game that you play in improv where it looks like I'm trying to help you, but I'm actually making things worse. So every time you move this way, I'm going to go the exact opposite way. Every time you hand me something, I'm going to drop it, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so the story goes, and this is from Edie McClurg herself, the story goes that like she's basically telling Jeffrey Jones, like, okay, so let's do this. When you stand, I sit. You sit, I stand. Like all of these things. And so she thinks like this is probably going to be like a quarter, half of the day, because it is John Hughes who just ran footage nonstop all the time. And so they and action, they do the scene, cut, moving on. McClure was like, what? And he's like, it's not, and Hughes is like, it's not going to get any better than that. This is literally as good as it gets. So when you think of that scene where
That's awesome.
he's like, he's like, go find, he keeps trying to tell her, go find where Ferris Bueller is. And she keeps, you're like, oh, she's trying to help him. That's all her. That's literally every bit of that scene is Edie McClure. Amazing.
Shame is people are always going to look back and remember her as I don't know, middle of the road, small time character actor who is funny. They're not going to realize what a talented artist she was to put something together like that. Like her whole background, I guess is the Bay Area from California. I mean, she had a real legit on stage comedy live performance background.
I mean, she's part of the Groundlings. Like she was there with Paul Rubens and Phil Hartman. Like she's part of that crew.
Oh, so she's a slacker, is what you're saying.
And she just, her look, she looks like actor first. People may not realize she was a hustling comedian. And I think she's cool. It's just one of those people we grew up with, Sean, that I'll always kind of remember maybe more fondly than they deserve just because we grew up with them.
Speaking of which,
I just love her. I love her little scenes where they're so good that Hughes just has to leave them in the movie, even though they're not adding to the script. They're not adding to the plot. It's just her being great. Her sniffing the white out, her pulling the pencils out of her hair, all of that stuff.
She's always got some business going on.
Great. Huh?
She's always got some business going on.
Yes.
You're like, let's have an excuse to cut back to her doing something wild and funny. And it's like, it's really good.
Well, I loved her ever since I saw her on Small Wonder. So, like I said before, I'm a little biased.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you guys, because it's again, this is a little bit out of my time wheel here and everything. What were you guys' thoughts growing up and everything on Jennifer Grey? Because we haven't mentioned her once this episode.
I mean,
as a kid watching this movie, I hated her. I hated her so much because she's anti Ferris Bueller.
She's ruining the party.
Watching her as an adult and seeing just how great she is in this movie. She is so good in this movie.
So in my house, in my family, in my community, my neighborhood, stretch it out, my school, whatever you want to say, Dirty Dancing was such a force majeure in the world of entertainment that I couldn't see anything other than Baby from Dirty Dancing the majority of my life when I watched this movie. So that kind of made it tough for me to really have much an opinion about Jeannie, I think is her name in this.
Mm-hmm.
Jeannie. Her friends call her Shauna, but her name's Jean.
Yeah, so she is the she's the one that it probably took me the most time to sort of see her as her own character because I just look and see Baby from Dirty Dancing. A couple of things I like about her is I kind of like whenever she's running, she has this really weird gait. And I don't know if it's because her shoes and her pants are just too tight or something, or if it's because she's putting on a bit of an affect, but I love it because there's something so like ridiculous, but yet it feels real, like the rage of wanting to run at somebody, but you're not in practical clothing. I love that. And then, she does the old karate kicks to Rooney's face, and that makes
really
me
her.
She's pretty athletic and flexible. Why does she run so funny? And then I start thinking she's the first John Wick because he runs kind of funny.
Yeah, you didn't see the other 5 guys that shot her legs up earlier.
The choices she makes in this movie, they're just the best. Because that's all improv when she's on the stairs at the police station when she's just she got caught making out with Charlie Sheen. Her doing the okay and the
so happy
the big laugh. That's all her, all improvised. I love the fact too that when I can't remember which interview it is. I think it's the 2020 interview with her where she says that, they had the worst, her and Matthew Broderick had the set's worst kept secret that they were actually secretly dating. And so the scene at the back door with Rooney, she can't even make eye contact with him because anything he does is making her laugh at the time. And so she's like, I can see it now when I watch that scene where I'm like, oh, I'm barely keeping it together. And so knowing that, having that knowledge, watching that scene now, it's because it's one of the only scenes they have together in the movie. And watching that scene now, it kind of adds to it how smitten she is at the time with him in that movie.
Her going down the stairs though. That's that one where you're just like, oh, all of that's real right there. That's just that's pouring off of a real situation, and that's so good because you can just see it. It's just like, oh, she's not acting right there. That like there's acting, but there's a bit of something else is coming out as well, which is so nice.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead. I've been talking nonstop.
I was also just going to say that, in the way that she has her sort of change of heart, her, how the Grinch Stole Christmas moment where her heart grows 3 sizes when she kisses Charlie Sheen. I still didn't buy how quickly she went from enemy to ally of Ferris, but I just end up buying into it with the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And she also has beef with Rooney going on there, but I never could quite buy on to how quickly she bailed Ferris out at the end and how cool she was with it, because she seems like a person who's never been cool under fire a single time in her life. And then all of a sudden she handles that one like as if she were Ferris.
Well, Garth tells her the problem is not with your brother. Your problem is with you.
She took it to heart, man.
I tell you what, though,
I love Charlie Sheen in that scene so much. It might be his best acting performance ever.
He looks like
really good.
He's so cool looking. You understand why every chick in 1980, whatever the hell's a 6 or whatever, would totally be on this dude, because he's got everything going for him. He looks like he's drugged out of his mind, but still looks so friggin' cool. His jacket fits him perfect. He's just the right size of person. He's not like big. It's like they build him in a cool factory.
There's all those great little bits that he has that I gotta think was given to him by Hughes, where, well, why don't you stick your thumb up your butt? And he puts his arm up. And he just starts rubbing his thumb. Great. Or later where she goes, well, why don't you blow yourself? And he just looks down.
At his, yeah. So do we want to play a game? Favorite line? Do you guys have a favorite line or favorite exchange from the movie? Because it's a classic.
That's impossible for me.
You're an asshole.
Oh, that's a good one. I like what's the score? 0-0. Who's winning? The Bears. That's a good one. Pretty good. They're the ones that me and my friends used to just say to each other a lot, are the ones I remember, I guess. And do you speak English? What country you think this is? That was another favorite of mine.
I also like Jeannie on the phone with the cops. You speaking the English? She's like going crazy with that phone in her bedroom. Oh, so good. There's so many. I mean, my favorite line is probably what I started with here today. I bet you've never smelled a real school bus before.
Oh, have you ever
so weird about that?
Have either of you ever watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off on like basic cable? And then when the credits come on, they go down into the corner and start showing commercials.
I've seen that happen before, not specifically for this movie, but I'm aware of the practice.
This is the movie that it should not be allowed to happen.
Agreed.
If you sit through this movie and they rob me of the credits, because there's something about the whole experience of the credits on this movie. The movie is not complete without experience in the credits.
Well, you guys know the story with the editor on this movie, right?
I do not.
I don't think so.
So he is the same editor from The Empire Strikes Back. Hughes brings him in. Hughes knows that he has this. He's got just an insane amount of stuff. And he doesn't know what to cut, and he really kind of doesn't know how to make the story jive. So it's really the editor who is kind of crafting this thing together.
Okay.
And
all first for the listeners.
And he gets to a point where, because there's so many different storylines, and there was a lot more stuff with Rooney, and he loved the school bus scene so much that he's like, we're not gonna throw this out. Like, let's just put this aside for now. Maybe we can find a place for this. And Hughes had shot the scene with Ferris at the end of the movie going, go home, it's over. And he kind of like gives you the old lady wave away.
Yeah.
And the editor says to Hughes, no one is ever going to see this. Like, I don't know why you want to put this at the very end of the movie. No one is ever going to see this scene because people are going to leave.
Scenes in cinema history.
Right. But the reason why that is because very smartly, the editor and neither one of them can remember who came up with it, is that the editor and Hughes have this conversation of, why don't we put over the credits, we put this scene, the school bus scene in the movie. That way people are going to stay watching the credits, and then we hit the it's over, go home. And what just a stroke of genius that is, because the way they edit that scenes together, it's perfect to the point of like, our credits are over.
And the musical selection was perfect.
So there's so many.
The song by Yellow.
There's so many music stings in this movie, though, like needle drops that are just so many things are perfect. The looking at Chicago for the first time, like the city of downtown Chicago, and that big city now.
Oh, they even have the Star Wars theme going, the John Williams music when they're out there in the Ferrari.
Yeah, when they hit that jump, oh my god, it's
awesome.
It's so perfect.
Any movie that's got those wild card jumps and stuff over hills and everything, I am all about it. It's just like, give me a flying, because that's how you just draw like cars in comics and stuff. No cars are ever touching the ground in comic books and stuff like that. Right. That's what I like seeing in movies and stuff, where cars are just like, how is this jumping in this? Like, I don't care how wacky the streets of San Francisco are. You're not going 5 feet in the bloody air.
So like one of the things, so we haven't really talked about this, which is the the half-assed reason why we're watching this movie in the first place, which is Matthew Broderick good in this movie? Is he great in this movie?
He's gotta be. I mean, he carries it. He created a whole new version of cool. I don't even know if we had this kind of cool before Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think especially when you bring it down to this time, because I don't know what you read a couple things, but there were other folks that were kind of that might have been in this particular role. Emilio Estevez, one of the names I read, which I think would have been not the right choice, but an interesting choice. But I think he brings a quality to it that I don't know that anybody else would have had specifically around that time. There is something about him that he's got an angelic enough face, but there's something behind it. You know, you can see the kind of the devil may care kid back in the middle of it, but there's something about him that's charming enough that lets him get away with it.
What I read from Jonathan Hughes was he liked him because he considered him to be the equivalent of a 15-year-old Jimmy Stewart. So do you see some Jimmy Stewart there?
No, Jimmy Stewart's likable.
I think he is so likable in this movie. You don't think so?
No, he is. I was just kind of,
yeah, people love him.
Merching a little bit.
People, especially people of a certain age, always love this kid.
Yeah, and you know, he does get nominated for a Golden Globe for this movie, and he beat out just names where it's just like, why would you consider Kiefer Sutherland for Ferris Bueller? I don't understand that part. But sure, okay.
Kiefer's hilarious. You shut up.
You know, and
he's a nepo baby, so he gets the audition.
Fair.
Sure. You know, they're looking at Johnny Depp for Ferris Bueller. They're looking at all these people, and no matter what name you throw out there, Emilio Estevez, they were looking at for Cameron. Whatever names they're throwing out there, it's all wrong. No, it's all wrong. You got it all wrong. Like Matthew Broderick is literally the one of one who can do this at this time. I think now, if you were going to do this now, there's probably a couple of people who could pull this off, but the only reason why is because they've seen Ferris Bueller already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to throw a quick fast one in here. I met Alan Ruck when I worked in TV years and years ago. He was in town. He was doing the producers with, I can't remember if it was Matthew Broderick or Nathan Lane. I forget who it was, but they were doing the producers and stuff. And he was a delight.
It definitely wasn't Matthew Broderick, because I watched an interview in 2020 when they were doing the Together Alone. Where they were having those big like reunion shows.
Yeah. So it's probably Nathan Lane then.
And they had said on that reunion show that they had not been in the same room together for 15 years.
Okay. Yeah. Then definitely was Nathan Lane at that point. But he came down, talked about it, and just in the 15 minutes that I hung around him and stuff, very affable kind of guy.
Great dude. Like in real life, great.
Yeah.
Also, the with that thing where they all had the reuniting, and it's you got Alan Ruck, you got Matthew Broderick, you got Jennifer Grey, and Mia Sara. One of these people hasn't aged well, and that person is Matthew Broderick. He must have been so pissed being on that Zoom meeting where he's like, well, Jesus, these people look amazing, and I look like complete shit.
Yeah.
I would have felt so bad being on that Zoom meeting. I just got
cast as a Sackler. That's how bad I look. They think I'm a Sackler.
Alan Ruck looks great, like for his age, because
he's on Succession on HBO. If you
right, and he just looks terrific. Like probably the best he's ever looked at his life. And then you got Mia Sara, who's just the best looking girl in the world. And then
check her out in Time Cop.
And then you got and then you got your Jennifer Grey there, who when she gets in the car wreck and gets the nose job, like she looks like a different person now, but she still looks great.
Well, let's get.
And then you got old sack of potatoes, Matthew Broderick there. I want to talk about one thing before we end.
Yes, I have one more quick one for you, Adam. So let's go.
No, you go ahead.
So, Adam, I want to talk fashion.
Okay.
I want to talk Ferris Bueller fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you, because I think you're the guy who might be as familiar with this, but is there like a little Ferris Bueller infused in ska fashion, or is ska fashion infused in Ferris Bueller, or is there just like no similarities?
I think there's maybe a tiny little bit. There was
the bowling shoes and stuff, man.
There's a song during the parade that like is a sound alike to the Specials Mirror in the Bathroom. That's it's very similar to that kind of, maybe it's not the Specials, but Mirror in the Bathroom is the song. It's somewhat similar to that. So I feel like I understand where your question's coming from. I don't know that it was intentional.
It just felt like a totally different kind of fashion that I'd ever seen before. And then suddenly people were liking it.
Can we talk about the big FU of fashion of Cameron in this movie?
I want to talk about it if it has to do with the hockey jersey.
It does.
I know the story because Alan Ruckman really put a lot of thought into the character of Cameron.
He sure did.
You want to share?
So Red Wings, so that's a Detroit team. They're in Chicago. And if we know anything about Mr. John Hughes, he's a Chicago man. So it doesn't seem to make a whole hell of a lot of sense that would be a Detroit shirt.
Well, because Alan Ruck put a ton of thought into his character as a big FU to everybody who lives in Chicago. Cameron is a Detroit Red Wings fan because
so just spite.
Isn't that great?
His grandfather, Cameron Fry's grandfather, lived in Detroit, and Cameron is always miserable at home with his parents in Chicago. But every time he goes to visit his grandfather and they go to see a Red Wings game, it's the only time in his life he's happy. And then his grandfather died, and now all he has is his Red Wings jersey to remind him of the only time he was ever happy as a child.
Oh, that's funny, because the story I heard is that it's just a big FU to everybody in Chicago. That's funny.
Well, it started that way, and then they're like, listen, we need to justify this with a story point. Now make this backstory up. That'll be fine.
So the last, do you have more?
That's all that's all I had.
So the last thing I want to talk about is Ferris Bueller's bedroom. So I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but Ferris Bueller's bedroom, it isn't actually a bedroom. Like it's shot on, part of that is shot on location, part of that is shot on stages, but the actual location, it was a sunroom. It wasn't an actual bedroom. That's why there's so many bloody windows in his room.
I was about to say,
also
the big panoramic window thing that like where you have to have those wild ass curtains that you wouldn't have in a room, that doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. So yeah, that makes sense.
And although there are movies that were shot before Ferris Bueller's bedroom was shot, where like if you see a movie like Real Genius, you see what their dorm room looks like. Like Val Kilmer's dorm room and Real Genius is also just wall-to-wall posters and stuff. Mm-hmm. But it really was made where like every American boy wanted their bedroom to look like Ferris's room. And so that's basically what starts this whole thing, where after Ferris Bueller, every teenage boy's room in an American movie or TV show for the next 30 years looks like Ferris's room. But there was a reason behind it with Ferris's room, because they were hiding more windows, because that whole room is basically all windows. And so they had to make it look like it was a kid's bedroom. And so the way they did that was just junking it up with all of this stuff that Ferris would find cool.
And part of what I thought made Ferris a new kind of cool, particularly for the mid 80s, you didn't really have this kind of cool, is he's popular in high school, but the posters he have up aren't like pop stars, music, athletes. He's got like French new wave cinema posters that are the size of a whole wall. Like some of them look like they're 5 feet by 4 feet or something like that.
Unfortunately, the reason why they have that poster up is because they couldn't get clearances for a lot of that stuff. I mean,
and then he's got like the flag from the United Kingdom hanging up on his door. I mean, he does not. Every kid wanted a loud bedroom where all the space was being taken up by your quote unquote personality.
Yes.
But nobody actually seemed to notice what I thought was really cool is the fact that this is stuff kids don't know anything about for the most part.
Sets
them apart.
The Union Jack flag, not everybody sees it, but there's a Union Jack flag, and then there's a space for some posters, and then further to the right is the American flag next to that. You just don't see it very often because of the way they shot that room. There is I cannot tell you like how many times you know what, we'll talk about it off air. But I know I know all of the stories of that. Oh, also one more thing. So, you know that Hughes had a massive cocaine problem. I that's pretty common knowledge.
It was the
right?
80s, yes.
It was, and it's the reason why, like, you keep hearing stories about him, like, oh, he wrote that script in a weekend. Wow, I wonder how he did that.
Don't know.
And it made him monstrous on set because he has this huge cocaine problem. And Broderick being a 23-year-old when they shoot this movie, but he's also a celebrity and a movie star at this point. He's not as big as he'll get, but he is a movie star at this point. He's headlining a bloody movie, for God's sake. Him and John Hughes are getting into it. Like Hughes is like saying things like, I saw the screen test for your wardrobe fitting. And they did this thing where, like, hey, this is the wardrobe you're going to have. Why don't you walk around? And they everybody comes in the next day after the wardrobe test, and Hughes is like screaming at Mia Sara and at Alan Ruck, and Broderick comes in and he's like, I saw those tests, and Hughes is like, I saw those tests. It was there's absolutely no chemistry. You guys are absolute shit on camera. And Broderick's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that a wardrobe fitting was the time to shine. Something like that.
That's fair.
And immediately when Broderick has this weird tell that when he's nervous, but he doesn't want to show you that he's nervous, he rubs his ear with the wrong hand. So like his left ear, he rubs his ear with his right hand. And so Ruck is like, I know that you're getting nervous because I see that hand go up and start playing with your left ear, but Hughes doesn't know that. It's so great. And so there's all this, and so Hughes starts getting more and more angry with Matthew Broderick because he keeps standing up for himself. And so about halfway through the movie, it gets to a boiling point where Hughes turns to Ruck at some point and he's like, look, you may have to take over the Ferris role at this point because we can't change this out with somebody else, but we can change your part out with somebody else. So you may have to take over for Bueller, because it was getting so contentious between Broderick and Hughes. And when you hear stuff like that and you hear just what a nightmare that Hughes was to be around on set, it makes you realize later in his career why he's no longer directing movies, that, he's just writing them and he's producing them. So like all of that Disney stuff, he's no longer around on set. They would have like red carpet events for his movies. He wouldn't show up to any of those anymore because he was just like, I am done with this. I don't want to feel like this anymore. He probably also got off of the coke at that point, I'm guessing too, and he was just done. And it makes a whole lot more sense when you know that about the guy, that like the worst person you're ever going to meet on set, the worst version of John Hughes you're ever going to meet on set is on set John Hughes.
Yeah.
Well, and I know we will have some other Broderick related stories where maybe the shoes on the other foot come some subsequent movies that we'll be talking about in our series and stuff. So we'll
don't say.
We'll see if we got a little bit more some interesting Matthew Broderick stories, because I got a couple for some of these upcoming films and stuff like that. So we shall definitely see on that one. Well, let's talk about it, boys. Movies only come in two forms. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's either art or fart. Bruce, where does Ferris Bueller's Day Off land for you? Art or fart?
Oh, this is 100% art. I mean, kind of a sucker. I'm the maybe not perfect, but darn near close to the perfect age for this movie. Target demographic, grown up with it. Big fan of the actors and the filmmakers and all that. And, I can't see me seeing this as anything other than art.
Yeah, fair enough. Sean.
Yeah, it's art, man. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a miracle. This movie should not be nearly as good as it is, with all of the things in place that should have made this movie awful. But you get the right people, you get lucky enough. And man, I defy you to be a 40-year-old man. Sit down. Somebody is trying to tell you something while this movie is playing. You're going to have a hard time listening to that person.
Yes.
I saw this movie later in life when I first, probably something like I said, somewhere in my 20s or something. And when I first saw this movie, I actually did not like it, like almost at all, I think. I think I like some of the Ruck stuff and everything, and that just a little bit, but for the most part, I didn't really care for it, and some of it had to be Broderick or something. I couldn't tell you what it is, but in subsequent viewings over the years and everything, every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more. And this time I liked it a little bit more. Like you said, the art gallery scene, means something when you're looking at it from the right perspective and not just taking it on its very broad face value and everything. But when when we're getting tighter of Cameron and the painting and everything, it means something. And maybe sometimes when you're younger, you don't quite think about all that stuff. I certainly didn't. So, and maybe also comparing to what I was watching at the time, it was probably far, far different than that other stuff. So, I probably was apt to not like it at that point. But as I go on, I like this movie enough to where I believe, and I still think probably 15 to 20 minutes could be cut out and it actually be a better movie on account of it, pacing wise. I think it could be a little shorter. Still got to go art with this. I enjoyed it. You thought I might go fart for a second, didn't you? It was just like, oh,
no,
maybe
I didn't. First of all, you would be kicked off the podcast if you called it fart.
You would just be doing it to be edgy, man.
Yes, you would.
You're right. It would be, and honestly, in my 20s, that probably would have been my actual opinion on everything. But as we grow, as we mature, our tastes and stuff do as well. And
nobody
I feel like
wants to listen to edgelords anymore, dude.
No, it's few and far between. So that is it, everybody. That's our first headliner Matthew Broderick series themed episodes. We got a lot more Broderick to talk about in the coming weeks because you boys got some stories. Not all of them good. As a matter of fact, I'd say most of them are probably bad. So stay tuned. Subscribe for all that. Tell a friend. Review the show on your grandma's iPhone. Whip it out. Wave it around in front of people. People love to see that. Sean, where can they find other things that we do on the internet?
Well, you know what? We have got a show that's coming out very, very soon called Seanzy Like Spaceships. If you are a Patreon member, you will be able to listen to that program where each week I will be reviewing some movie that's got spaceships in it. And check that out. The first one's in the can. I'm working on the second episode now. And now that my schedule has freed up, I will be hitting that much harder this week. So please become a Patreon member and check that out.
Bruce, what's your favorite flavor of sparkling water?
I love LaCroix.
That's not a flavor. That's a brand, my friend. You need
I'm
to
sorry,
learn how
I
to
thought
play
that
the
was a
game.
flavor. Did we say what movie we're doing next week?
No, I'm about to do it in a second. You need to follow.
'Cause
You can
my
follow through with the
favorite
bit.
flavor of water. I say we should vote on it and have a little election because I'm not sure.
Oh, well, that's not what we're doing next week because we're going in chronological order, everybody. That's why you don't do that. So next week we're going to be covering Project X from 1987. Not a movie a ton of people have seen and stuff, but we are going to check that out because Matthew Broderick co-stars in that movie with, who is it again?
Helen Hunt.
Helen Hunt. That's what I was thinking. I just didn't want to screw myself over and say the wrong thing.
I saw that movie on a 16 millimeter projector at a campground at Carter Caves, Kentucky. So yeah, I love that movie.
Huh. Well,
thanks for suggesting this one, MVD.
And we'll be getting into that next week. So Project X for 1987 for Bruce Leslie, Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet. I'm Matt Porters, reminding you that the only difference between art and fart is an F.